Internet Explorer is a series of graphical web browsers developed by Microsoft and included as part of the Microsoft Windows line of operating systems, starting in 1995. The first version of Internet Explorer made its debut on August 16, 1995. It was a reworked version of Spyglass Mosaic, which Microsoft licensed from Spyglass Incorporated, like many other companies initiating browser development. It was first released as part of the add-on package Plus for Windows 95 that year. Later versions were available as free downloads, or in service packs, and included in the OEM service releases of Windows 95 and later versions of Windows. Originally Microsoft Internet Explorer only ran on Windows using Intel 80386 processor. Current versions also run on x64, 32-bit ARM-v7, PowerPC and IA64. Versions on Windows have supported MIPS, Alpha AXP in 16-bit and 32-bit x86 but currently support only 32-bit or 64-bit. A version exists for XBOX 360 called Internet Explorer for XBOX using PowerPC and an embedded OEM version called Pocket Internet Explorer, later rebranded Internet Explorer Mobile, which is currently based on Internet Explorer 9 and made for Windows Phone using ARM-v7, Windows CE, and previously, based on Internet Explorer 7 for Windows Mobile. It remains in development alongside the desktop versions. Internet Explorer has supported other operating systems with Internet Explorer for Mac and Internet Explorer for Unix have been discontinued. Since its first release, Microsoft has added features and technologies such as basic table display, XML HTTP request, which adds creation of dynamic web pages, and internationalized domain names, which allow websites to have native language addresses with non-Latin characters. The browser has also received scrutiny throughout its development for use of third-party technology and security and privacy vulnerabilities, and both the United States and the European Union have alleged that integration of Internet Explorer with Windows has been to the detriment of other browsers. The latest stable release has an interface allowing for use as both a desktop application, and is a Windows 8 application. OS compatibility. IE versions, over time, have had widely varying OS compatibility, ranging from being available for many platforms and several versions of Windows to only a few versions of Windows. Many versions of IE had some support for an older OS but stopped getting updates. The increased growth of the Internet in the 1990s and 2000s means that current browsers with small market shares have more total users than the entire market early on. For example, 90% market share in 1997 would be roughly 60 million users, but by the start of 2007 90% market share would equate to over 900 million users. The result is that later versions of IE6 had many more users in total than all the early versions put together. The release of IE7 at the end of 2006 resulted in a collapse of IE6 market share. By February 2007, market version share statistics showed IE6 at about 50% and IE7 at 29%. Regardless of the actual market share, the most compatible version of IE was 5X, which had Mac OS 9 and Mac OS X, Unix, and most Windows versions available and supported for a short period in the late 1990s. By 2007, IE had much narrower OS support, with the latest versions supporting only Windows XP Service Pack 2 and above. Internet Explorer 5.0, 5.5, 6.0, and 7.0 have also been unofficially ported to the Linux operating system from the Project ES for Linux. Windows, the version of Internet Explorer included with Windows 95 varied by OS a release. 2.0 was included with OS 1, 3.0 was included with OS 2, and 4.0 was included with OS 2.5. And Windows XP Service Pack 3 does not include IE7. Mac OS, Internet Explorer 2.0 and 2.0.1 requires System 7.0.1 or higher. Internet Explorer 2.1 requires System 7.1 or higher. included Internet Explorer 3.01 in Mac OS 8.0 and Mac OS 8.1. Internet Explorer 4.01 in Mac OS 8.5 and 8.5.1. Internet Explorer 4.5 from Mac OS 8.6 to 9.0.4. Internet Explorer 5 from Mac OS 9.1 to 9.2.2 and Mac OS X v 10.0. Internet Explorer 5.1 in Mac OS X v 10.1. Internet Explorer 5.2 in Mac OS X v 10.2. Again, Internet Explorer 5 Macintosh Edition requires Mac OS 7.6 or higher. Internet Explorer version 5.1, 5.1.4, 5.1.5, 5.1.6 and 5.1.7 requires Mac OS 8.0 or higher or Mac OS 7.6.1 with Appearance Manager. Others, early versions, Microsoft Internet Explorer. Microsoft Internet Explorer made its debut on August 16, 1995. It was a reworked version of Spyglass Mosaic which Microsoft had licensed, like many other companies initiating browser development, from Spyglass Incorporated. It came with Microsoft Plus for Windows 95 and the OEM release of Windows 95. It was installed as part of the Internet Jumpstart Kit in Plus for Windows 95. The Internet Explorer team began with about 6 people in early development. Microsoft Internet Explorer 1.5 was released several months later for Windows NT and added support for basic HTML table rendering. By including it free of charge on their operating system, they did not have to pay royalties to Spyglass Incorporated, resulting in a lawsuit and $8 million settlement on January 22, 1997. Although not included, this software can also be installed on the original release of Windows 95. Microsoft Internet Explorer is no longer supported, or available for download from Microsoft. However, archived versions of the software can be found on various websites. Features: Microsoft Internet Explorer came with an install routine replacing a manual installation required by many of the existing web browsers. Microsoft Internet Explorer 2. Microsoft Internet Explorer 2 was released for Windows 95, Windows NT 3.5, and NT 4.0 on November 22, 1995. It featured support for SSL, cookies, VRML, RSA, and Internet news groups. Version 2 was also the first release for Windows 3.1 and Macintosh Systems 7.0.1. Although the Mac version was not released until January 1996 for PPC, and April for 68K. Version 2.1 for the Mac came out in August 1996, although by this time, Windows was getting 3.0. Version 2 was included in Windows 95 OS R1 and Microsoft's Internet Starter Kit for Windows 95 in early 1996. It launched with 12 languages, including English, but by April 1996, this was expanded to 24, 20, and 9 for Win 95, Win 3.1, and Mac, respectively. The 2.0 version supported double byte character set. Microsoft Internet Explorer 3. Microsoft Internet Explorer 3 was released on August 13, 1996 and went on to be much more popular than its predecessors. Microsoft Internet Explorer 3 was the first major browser with CSS support, although this support was only partial. It also introduced support for ActiveX controls, Java applets, inline multimedia, and the PICS system for content metadata. Version 3 also came bundled with Internet Mail and News, NetMeeting, and an early version of the Windows Address Book, and was itself included with Windows 95 OS R2. Version 3 proved to be the first more popular version of Internet Explorer, bringing with it increased scrutiny. In the months following its release, a number of security and privacy vulnerabilities were found by researchers and hackers. This version of Internet Explorer was the first to have the blue E logo. The Internet Explorer team consisted of roughly 100 people during the development of 3 months. The first major IE security hole, the Princeton word macro virus loophole, was discovered on August 22, 1996 in IE3. Backwards compatibility was handled by allowing users who upgraded to IE3 to still use the last IE, because the installation converted the previous version to a separate directory. Microsoft Internet Explorer 4. Microsoft Internet Explorer 4, released in September 1997, deepened a level of integration between the web browser and the underlying operating system. Installing version 4 on a Windows 95 or Windows NT4 machine and choosing Windows Desktop Update would result in the traditional Windows Explorer being replaced by a version more akin to a web browser interface, as well as the Windows desktop itself being web-enabled via Active Desktop. The integration with Windows, however, was subject to numerous packaging criticisms. This option was no longer available with the installers for later versions of Internet Explorer, but was not removed from the system if already installed. Microsoft Internet Explorer 4 introduced support for group policy, allowing companies to configure and lock down many aspects of the browser's configuration as well as support for offline browsing. Internet Mail and News was replaced with Outlook Express, and Microsoft Chat and an improved Net Meeting were also included. This version was also included with Windows 98. New features that allowed users to save and retrieve posts in comment forms were added, but they are not used today. Microsoft Internet Explorer 4.5 offered new features such as easier 128-bit encryption. It also offered a dramatic stability improvement over prior versions, particularly the 68K version, which was especially prone to freezing. Microsoft Internet Explorer 5. Microsoft Internet Explorer 5, launched on March 18, 1999, and subsequently included with Windows 98 Second Edition and bundled with Office 2000, was another significant release that supported bidirectional text, Ruby characters, XML, XSLT, and the ability to save web pages in HTML format. IE5 was bundled with Outlook Express 5. Also, with the release of Microsoft Internet Explorer 5.0, Microsoft released the first version of XML HTTP request, giving birth to AJAX. It was the last with a 16-bit version. Microsoft Internet Explorer 5.01, a bug fix version included in Windows 2000, was released in December 1999. Microsoft Internet Explorer 5.5 followed in July 2000, improving its print preview capabilities, CSS and HTML standard support, and developer APIs. This version was bundled with Windows ME. However, version 5 was the last version for Mac and Unix. Version 5.5 was the last to have compatibility mode, which allowed Microsoft Internet Explorer 4 to be run side by side with the 5X. The IE team consisted of over 1,000 people by 1999, with funding on the order of $100 million per year. Microsoft Internet Explorer 6. Microsoft Internet Explorer 6 was released on August 27, 2001, a few months before Windows XP. This version included DHTML enhancements, content-restricted inline frames, and partial support of CSS Level 1, DOM Level 1, and SMIL 2.0. The MSXML engine was also updated to version 3.0. Other new features included a new version of the Internet Explorer Administration Kit, Media Bar, Windows Messenger integration, fault collection, automatic image resizing, P3P, and a new look and feel that was in line with the Luna visual style of Windows XP, when used in Windows XP. Internet Explorer 6.0 SP1 offered several security enhancements and coincided with the Windows XP SP1 patch release. In 2002, the Gopher protocol was disabled, and support for it was dropped in Internet Explorer 7. Internet Explorer 6.0 SV1 came out on August 6, 2004 for Windows XP SP2 and offered various security enhancements and new color buttons on the user interface. Internet Explorer 6 updated the original Blue logo to a lighter blue and more 3D look. Microsoft now considers IE6 to be an obsolete product and recommends that users upgrade to Internet Explorer 8. Some corporate IT users have not upgraded despite this, in part because some still use Windows 2000, which will not run Internet Explorer 7 or above. Microsoft has launched a website, http://ie6countdown.com/, with the goal of getting Internet Explorer 6 usage to drop below 1% worldwide. Its usage is 6% globally as of October 2012, and now about 6.3% since June 2013, and depending to the country the usage differs heavily. While the usage in Norway is 0.1%, it is 21.3% in the People's Republic of China. On January 3, 2012, Microsoft announced that usage of IE6 in the United States had dropped below 1%. Windows Internet Explorer 7. Windows Internet Explorer 7 was released on October 18, 2006. It includes bug fixes, enhancements to its support for web standards, tabbed browsing with tab preview and management, a multiple engine search box, a web feeds reader, internationalized domain name support, extended validation certificate support, and an anti-phishing filter. With IE7, Internet Explorer has been decoupled from the Windows shell. Unlike previous versions, the Internet Explorer ActiveX control is not hosted in the Windows Explorer process, but rather runs in a separate Internet Explorer process. It is included with Windows Vista and Windows Server 2008, and is available for Windows XP Service Pack 2 and later, and Windows Server 2003 Service Pack 1 and later. The original release of Internet Explorer 7 required the computer to pass a Windows Genuine Advantage validation check prior to installing, but on October 5, 2007, Microsoft removed this requirement. As some statistics show, by mid-2008, Internet Explorer 7 market share exceeded that of Internet Explorer 6 in a number of regions. For newer versions see, Internet Explorer. Release history for desktop Windows OS version. Service packs are not included unless significant. See also, Internet Explorer, features of Internet Explorer, history of Internet Explorer, references. Further reading